It is good to have each one of you here today. We're starting a brand new series today called Habits, Making Good Ones and Breaking Bad Ones. All right? And when I first shared that I was going to be doing this series, I shared that and that title, and there was this like murmur of, oh, all through the church, like, oh, and I need to be there for that. Oh my goodness, wow, yeah, oh, I need that. Anybody besides me struggle with habit problems, right? Like, okay, it's like, you look at your life and you're like, seriously, how is it possible that I automatically do that right there, right? And let me talk to you about habits. I want to start off by telling you the story of British cycling, the British cycling team. Now, in 2003, the British cycling team hired David Brailsford. That's this guy right here. It hired him as its coach. They had basically 100 years of averageness. They weren't that good. It was just mediocrity. Since 1908, British riders had won one gold medal at the Olympic Games in 100 years. So, yeah, that's pretty mediocre. That's pretty average, right? They had 0 Tour de France wins. The Tour de France is the big bicycle race that goes all over France, right? They had 0 wins in 110 years of the Tour de France race. One of the top bike manufacturers in Europe refused to sell their equipment to the British cycling team because they were like, if people see the British cycling team using our equipment, it'll reflect poorly on us, right? Like they wouldn't sell it to them because they were like, we don't want to look bad, right? So David Brailsford was hired as their coach, and he committed to the team to a strategy that he referred to as the aggregation of marginal gains. All right, now that's a very technical terminology, but basically what it means is the adding up of a whole bunch of small habits. All right, and so he said, I'm going to search for a tiny margin of improvement in every aspect of cycling for our team. He said, I want to improve everything we do by 1%. Okay, so he said, we're going to break cycling into all of its parts, the idea, and we're going to try to improve everything 1%. So, he said, here's what he said. He said, the whole principle came from the idea that if you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike and then improve it by 1%, when you put it all back together again, you'd get a significant increase. So, they redesigned the bike seats to make them more comfortable. They rubbed alcohol on the tires for a better grip. They asked riders to wear electrically heated clothing to maintain ideal muscle temperature while they were riding. They used biofeedback sensors to monitor how every athlete responded to a particular workout. They tested various fabrics in wind tunnels. They tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the fastest muscle recovery. They hired a surgeon to come in and teach every member of the bike riding team how to wash their hands properly. Because they said, if you catch a cold, if you got germs on your hands and you catch a cold, you can't ride at 100%. And so what if we can just barely improve everything? They determined the type of pillow and mattress that led to the best night's sleep for every rider. They even painted the inside of the equipment truck, the team truck, stark glossy white. Because they said if we do that, we could spot little bits of dirt and dust that might get in these sensitive bikes and maybe mess them up, right? Now, all of these little habits, these little small 1% improvement things, started adding up. And in 2008, 5 years after they started this process, in 2008, in the Olympic Games in Beijing, they won 60% of all the gold medals available in cycling. In 2012, the 2012 Olympics, they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. In 2012, Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. In 2013, his teammate Chris Froome won, and Froome won again in 2015, 2016, and 2017. The British team won 5 Tour de France victories in 6 years. And from 2007 to 2017, British cyclists won 178 world championships, 66 gold medals, and 5 Tour de France victories in what is widely considered the greatest single successful run in cycling history. It was not just like they kind of got better, they dominated everybody else. Now, how does that happen? How do you go from nothing to everybody's winning gold medals? Well, in one word, they changed some habits, right? They just changed some habits that they had, some small things, and it resulted in significant changes and improvement and an upgrade in their life and in their performance. Now, I want to give just a word of kind of warning or clarification here at the beginning. Somebody asked me when I said I was going to do this sermon series, they're like, it just sounds like it's kind of self-help. What, are you going to teach people to stop biting their fingernails? That's a fair statement. That's a fair question. But let me try to clarify. This is not just self-help, all right? It's not just that. This is not just like Tony Robbins with less cussing, all right? The gospel has some overlap with self-help. Okay, it has some overlap with self-help things, but it is fundamentally different in a few different areas. One of them is that the gospel recognizes the spiritual bondage of sin in the human heart. And we recognize that. We look at it and we look honestly at it, whereas the self-help movement is primarily about the human potential. They're like, oh, humans are basically good, we just need to improve them. And Christianity is like, humans are basically evil, but God can improve us. Okay, but there's still improvement in both sides. Am I making sense? Right? So 2 Peter 2:19 says, they, and I would say sometimes it's self-help teachers, they promise freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. And so I would tell you this. Here's how this series fits into your life right now. Whether you're a believer in Jesus at this moment or whether you're not really, you're like, I don't really know where I am. Okay, if you're not a believer, no amount of habit changing, if you're taking notes, this is on your handout, no amount of habit changing will save you. Okay, if you're not a believer in Jesus, no amount of habit changing is going to save you. Okay, it's not like suddenly you're going to be like, I got up earlier and I fixed my health habits and I'm eating better breakfast and now I'm a Christian. That's not going to happen. All right, and even breaking some bad habits. I quit drinking and now I'm a Christian. No amount of breaking bad habits or even developing good habits, as good as that is, we're not saved by the things that we do. We are saved by faith in Jesus. And so, but it can be, even if you're not a Christian, it can be a form of repentance. Let me give you an example. My great-grandpa, while he was not even a Christian yet, he was not a believer and didn't really trust in the Lord at all, but he had some habits and things that he knew were not right, and so one day he was walking along and he was just under what the old-timers used to call under conviction. Like he was just, like the Holy Spirit was pressing down his need for God on his life, on his heart. And he was walking along and just kind of sick of life and sick of being in sin, and he turned around to there was a big open field there. He pulled out his chewing tobacco and just chunked it out in the field as hard as he could, and he never used it again. It was like, he wasn't a believer, but he was like, I am so sick of some of this junk in my life. I'm so sick of some of these habits. Like, I want to move toward God. And he had made this decision that that's what he was going to do. So it can be, like, in fact, John Wesley said, repentance is the porch of religion. Okay? Like, you get the idea, right? Like, the porch of religion, not meaning like just the religious system, but like believing in Jesus. Repentance is like coming up on the porch, right? And he said faith is the door and holiness is the whole house itself, right? Is the whole building. Okay. So even if you're like, I'm not sure if I'm really convinced that I'm there yet, that I'm a Christian, you know what? You can move toward God in your habits even, right? You can move in that direction. So some of you have this big, heavy load of sinful habits that you're carrying, and I would just tell you, if that's where you're at, it may be just the decision you need to make today is, you know what, I'm going to fight this thing. I'm going to stop making friends with sin in my life, and I'm going to start making war with sin in my life. It's just, you can't just be like, well, this is who I am, I guess. I guess this is just who I am forever. No. Maybe you like, you know what? I'm not going to be friends with sin. I'm going to be enemies with sin. And that kind of decision, that's a major shift in your life. But now, if you are a believer, okay, and we got a lot of folks here that are believers, maybe you've been for a long time or a short time. If you are a believer in Christ, you need this series. And here's why. It's on your handout. Because no amount of faith without new holy habits is real. No amount of faith without new holy habits is real. James said this. He said, you show me your faith without your works, without your actions, and I'll show you my faith by my actions. Am I making sense? He said, faith without works is dead. What's he saying? That what God means when he says, I want you to have faith, means that along with that goes these new sets of actions, these new habits, these new ways of thinking, these new ways of acting. And so if you're a believer, I've got really good news for you. Show your faith. Let your faith start impacting the way you actually live, think, act, all those things. Impact your habits, all right? So this series is not about goals. This series is about habits. Goals are destinations. Habits are pathways, all right? So we're going to talk through what are the principles for developing new habits. And I'll give these to you. They're not all on your handout. I'm going to give you, there's 6 steps, 6 messages in this series. Number 1, be clear. Secondly is change beliefs. Thirdly is rewire triggers. Fourth one is harness emotions. I'm sorry, I'm going too fast, aren't I? Harness emotions, recruit help, and then keep going. All right. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna give you number 1. I'm gonna start with the first habit in the whole series. All right. Number 1, be clear. Be clear. Be clear. If you want to change something in your life, you have to be completely clear about what it is you want to change. Utterly clear about what it is. One of the reasons that stops a lot of people from making changes is just fuzzy thinking. That they haven't really thought through exactly what it is that they want to change. It's just kind of like, well, I feel like a lot of changes in my life need to happen. Well, okay. What specifically? Well, I probably should change some of my habits about this or that. Okay, so what specific actions are you taking right now, and what specific actions are you going to replace it with? Am I making sense? Like trying to think clearly, exactly clearly about what kind of things you're wanting to change. So, here's how you get clear, all right? If you're tired of fuzzy thinking and fuzzy living, where you're not clear, but you're really not sure how to go about it, I'm going to give you 6 habits today. I'm going to give you 6 practices for being clear about your habits. Number 1, start with why. Start with why. 1 Corinthians 10:31, and it looks like I forgot to put the reference in there. Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. So Paul is saying, in this case, he's saying he's clear about the motivation for a Christian. That in this case, he said, whatever you do, do everything for the glory of God. Here's what I'm saying. Do you know why? Do you know why you want to change this? Do you know why you want to make a difference in that area of your life? Do you know why this thing is not okay any longer, and why you want to replace it with something else? Why? Why? Okay, I want to be more Christ-like. I want to be more close with my family. I want my relationship in this area to improve. I want my health to be different. Okay, why exactly? Why do you want to do this? This is about your values. It's about your values. Okay? Not what I need to do, but why I want to do it. Why do I want this? In this area, in this starting with why, don't focus on why other people want you to do it. Focus on why you want to do it. Why do I want to do this? Not like, well, so-and-so said I should probably, so that guy on TV or that pastor, he said, no. Why do you want to do it? You got to tap into, what's your motivation? Do you want this change, and why? What's your motivation for it? All right. So Don't focus on why others want you to do it. Focus on your own values and your emotions. Why do you want this change to happen in your life? So answer that question. Why do I want this change to change this habit in my life? Number two, eliminate distractions. Eliminate distraction. It is difficult to be utterly, completely clear about what you want when you're busy listening to what everyone else wants you to think about. Okay? Have you ever considered this in your life? Have you ever considered that every message that enters your life, every advertisement, every TV show, every billboard, every song, every radio DJ, every social media post, every phone call, every text, every video game, make the list longer and longer. Every one of those things is something that somebody else felt like you should think about.
Well, I only watch
You know?
Hallmark, and it's all
Hallmark. Oh, I would pull my hair out. Well, I really would. Wow. The idea of this is that everybody has a message they think you ought to be thinking about right now. And so what I'm saying is sometimes if you want to get utterly clear, sometimes you have to turn off every other message and deep dive right here and say, now exactly what is it I want to change and why? Lord, talk to me. Help me to get a piece of paper, get a pen and say, now Lord, what is it exactly that I feel like needs to change here and why? So getting clear sometimes means eliminating the other distractions. Those other things that everybody else wants you to think about may not be important at all for your habits. They may not be important for your life, but search me. Look at what. I'm sorry. I'm skipping to the next one. It is difficult to be utterly, completely clear about what you want when you're busy listening to what everybody else says. So here's the thing. I am continually amazed at people and families who never stop the noise. Ever. The TV is continually playing. The radio is continually playing. There's no space to think your thoughts. Am I making sense at all? Like there's no space whatsoever. I had a friend one time I heard him preaching, and he said he said that God convicted him about this one time and said there's no quiet space in your life whatsoever. And he said, every time you get in the car, you immediately reach for the radio knob because it's like you can't be alone with your own thoughts. And he was like, yeah. So he turned off the radio, and he made a habit of turning off the radio when he drove in the car because he wanted to be alone with his own thoughts and God's. And that's a good practice. Now, I'm not saying it has to be in your car. That might not be a good time for you to think at all. Maybe you're always focused on driving or whatever. That probably would be good, I suppose. But what I'm saying is that in your life, where's the place where you think your thoughts and God's thoughts? Where is that place as opposed to what everybody else thought you should be thinking about right then? Some of you, maybe you need to uninstall Facebook. Maybe you need to put your phone on airplane mode for 1 hour every day. Or maybe you need to shut the phone completely off. Teenagers, hear me out now, okay? Everybody from age 13 to age 25. You guys are the first generation to utterly grow up with smartphones. And so it's really easy for your life to never have any moment where you're just alone with your thoughts. And I hear people that they're like, oh, I can't handle that. I get anxious, I get worried, I get afraid, I get angry, I get bored. I would say that's probably a really good indication that you need to be alone with your thoughts. Because there's a tangle of stuff in there and in here that if you'd get quiet and listen to the Lord and get a piece of paper and read the scriptures, it would probably start untangling itself. It might take a little while, but it might start untangling itself to where it's not just a big ball of ugh. Am I making sense? Do you know what a big ball of ugh is, right? Don't look that up in the dictionary. You won't. It's not. You're going to find it. So I want to just give you one specific example. Now this guy, I don't think he's a Christian, but there's a guy recently that free soloed across Antarctica. Does anybody know that guy? Did you hear the news about that? He skied across Antarctica, like the South Pole, by himself. Nobody else, no support, no anything, just him and the ice. His name is, I've lost his name now. I can't remember. His name is Crazy. Yes, that's right. That's his name. He started off pulling a sled with 500 and something pounds of food and supplies. And he just started off, of course, the sled got lighter as he kept going. But he went all the way across Antarctica. Just him. It took like 70 days, 50 days? I don't know. It was a long time. It took all this time. There's nothing but the white and the sun and himself and the snow, and that's it. Now, some of you guys, if you tried to like free solo across your living room with no stimulation, you'd be like, all right? You try to free solo across the church parking lot, and you're like, I'll never make it to my car, all right? This guy, you know how he did it? One of the things he did? Every year for 8 years, he would take 2 complete weeks of no stimulation whatsoever. Like 2 weeks, he would go away to a place where he was completely alone, no phone, no computer, no books, no paper, no pen, nothing but him and his thoughts, and he would do that for 2 weeks. Just eat and sleep and think and be completely alone for 2 weeks. So when the time came for him to do it for like 50 days or whatever it is, he's already done it, right? He knows how to do that and survive with his thoughts. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should do that. I'm just saying, here's a guy who figured out what it was like to spend time alone with his thoughts, and he didn't kill him. And he got mentally stronger in that process. He's mentally stronger now than he was before. Sometimes the fact that I can't be quiet is a sign of mental flabbiness, mental weakness. And I would just say, sometimes getting alone and saying, like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to think. And I'm going to think and I'm going to confront whatever thoughts I find there. And I'm going to think about them. And I'm going to pray over them. And I'm going to be just alone, me and God and my thoughts. And that's fine. And sometimes it helps you get really clear. Because clutter and noise does not lend itself to clarity in your life. All right. So I spent way longer on that one than I intended to. Let's go. Number 3. Here we go. Ask God for help. James 4:15 says you shouldn't say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Instead, he said, you should say, if the Lord is willing, we will live and do this or that. Now, I don't think that he's saying literally that every time you speak of the future, the phrase, Lord willing, or if the Lord wills, must come out of your mouth or you're sinning. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think what he's saying is this, that it's really ludicrous to live your life as if God has no hand on your future. As if there's no, I'm just going to plan and not include God in these plans at all. I think that's a terrible mistake, and that's what James is saying. No. If the Lord is willing, I'm going to do this. If the Lord is willing, I'm going to do that. What it means is you're recognizing that without God, all the habit changing in the world may profit you nothing. All the self-discipline in the world might not profit you really in terms of eternity's values if God's not involved in that. So here's the good news. Psalm 139, look at this. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Lord, search me out. Just dig around, Lord. Dig around in here, and help me to really know who I am and who you are. So when you get with God, sometimes clarity comes from being in His presence and with His people and in His Word and with Him in prayer. Sometimes clarity comes from that. Now sometimes it doesn't come the first day or the first hour. But sometimes it just takes a habitual presence of getting in the presence of God, and over the course of time, clarity comes. And God says, this is what I want. All right. Number 4, identify pains and pleasures. Identify pains and pleasures. I could say identify pros and cons, but I'd like to take a little different tack on this. Pains and pleasures, instead of just like pro and con. What pains, what are the things that this is costing me right now? This habit that I have, what are the things this is costing me right now? What am I missing out on? So, for instance, if you're processing through, say, drug use, all right? Okay, if you're processing through that, here's just a quick list I wrote down. What's it costing me? Well, mental clarity, family harmony, joy in my kids, being a good example, self-respect, money, jobs, relationship with the Lord, happiness, retirement security, health, blood pressure, teeth, friends, stress, all right? It can cost you all of those things, literally. So sometimes you need to get clear on exactly what is it I'm trying to figure out how to change. Sometimes you got to sit down and say, what is this costing me? And look at it really bluntly right in the face. What's it going to cost me? Not just today, because here's the thing. What we'd usually do is we're like, what's going to feel good in the next 30 minutes? That's how we live our life. What's going to make me feel better right now in the next half hour? Oh, I'm feeling disturbed. I'm feeling bored. I'm feeling worried. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling whatever. And so we go to this or this or this or this or something, this, because we don't want to deal with that right now. What will help me feel better right now? And those things, they may be costing you something in the 10-year journey that they're not costing you in the 30-minute journey. Am I making you sense there? Okay, so clarity about those things. So identifying pains. Secondly, I would say identifying pleasures. What do I expect to gain? How will this add to my life? What will this do to help my relationships? How will this affect my joy in the Lord? How will this influence my outlook in life? What good things will be in my life in 6 months if I make this change? How about in 10 years? If I make these changes, what? And I would encourage you, make this as crystal clear as you possibly can. I am in the season of life where my kids are getting older, and I'm suddenly beginning to realize that if I'm not careful, I could waste time that I don't have a lot of with some of my children. Okay, so Gracie will be 15 next month. At 18, I went to college, right? So not long after I turned 18, I went to college. Now, if she goes away to go somewhere to college, that means I got 3 years. Okay, so I'm in the process myself of being like, okay, so how do I need to change my habits so that, now, picture this in your mind. Gracie comes back home, and now she's graduated from college, and she's married, and she's got a little baby. And I sit down by the fire, and it's crackling. Can you hear it? The fire's crackling. In a nice leather recliner, and I get to hold that grandbaby. And Gracie's sitting across from me, and she's smiling at her husband there, that punk. And it's... No, I'm glad in her husband because I believe that. I can see that. And do you see what I'm saying? And I feel glad, and I feel happy, and I feel like this is peaceful and this is good. What am I doing? I'm seeing clearly what I want to achieve. Am I making sense? All right. Because I can see it, I can smell it, I can taste it, and the clearer it is, the pleasures. Because you know what? There are good things out there that God has for you. And He's holding them in His hands and saying, if you would make these changes, I have so much good for you. Right? I really think that. Like there's some real things in your life that He has for you. Okay. Let's keep going. Now, number 5, write it down. Write it down. Then the Lord replied, this is in the book of Habakkuk, Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so the herald may run with it. So the revelation in this case is God revealing his will to Habakkuk. All right, he's saying, I have a message for you, Habakkuk. I have a message for my people. And I want you to write it down and make it clear so that it could be run with. In fact, so the way it's written in Hebrew, it could be write it down so that a herald can run with it, like can run with the message and share it with somebody else. Or it could be write it down so clearly that someone who is running could still read it. It's like it could be either way in Hebrew. And so like if you're running by, it's got to be written really clear in big letters, right, for you to be able to read it. And so he's like, write it down, Habakkuk, make it so clear that you could see it if you're running by, or you could carry it off to somebody else and tell them about it. I want you to make it clear. Write down the vision. Now, often when God gives a revelation, it's done in the form of kind of a picture, a vision, a mental picture of what he wants. A vision or a mental picture of what he wants. If you're taking notes, that's the blanks. It's done in the form of a vision, a mental picture of what he wants. I could give you all kinds of examples from this from the Bible. Ezekiel in the valley of dry bones, right? God gives this mental picture to illustrate what he's trying to say. Daniel and the vision of the statue that was smashed by the great rock, and the rock of God's kingdom filled the whole earth, right? Mental pictures. Jeremiah and the almond branch. Paul and the vision of the Macedonian man. Agabus and the capture of Paul. Like there's all these things that often when God gives a picture of what he's going to do or what he wants, he gives it as this literal kind of mental picture. And so I would say, if you're convinced that God has for you a message, a new habit, a new thing in your life, a new holy rhythm in your life, then maybe you need to sit down and clarify that even more, like write it down. Actually put it on paper. Write down exactly what you're seeing, exactly what you're feeling. What is it? What are the pains that you see? What are the pleasures that you see? Write it down and give it some texture. And then it says, so that a herald may run with it. That way, you can tell yourself, and you can tell your family, and you can tell others exactly what it is. If you can't explain your new habit to somebody else, it's not clear. Right? If you can't tell them exactly when and what you'll be doing and how you'll be and when, if you can't do that, it's not clear yet. It's just kind of back there as a little hope back in the back of your mind somewhere. So you got to get this stark, utter clarity. So here's how I encourage you to write it down. All right? I am, emotion word, action, like an ing word, how often or how long, and why. So here's what that would look like. I am enjoying being pornography-free every single day because I love my wife and children. Do you see how that flowed through there? Okay, I am loving. You're writing it down in the present tense because it's an ongoing thing you want it to be, right? I am loving fasting until 1 p.m. 3 days per week because it's helping me be healthy for my kids and healthy spiritually. Okay. I am excited to spend 15 minutes per day in prayer using a prayer journal because it's helping me stay focused on God and love Him more. Are you hearing these? This is that kind of thing. Write down and make the vision as clear as possible. What's the new holy habit that you want? Now, I got to share with you just a quick story. I'm developing a new habit myself right now. Now, I'm in the process of rewiring some others, but there's one specifically that I decided back, I want to say maybe the first week in December. I got a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. $20, yeah, it's just $20, right? I got a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. I know. But ask my wife and kids, I almost never wore a seatbelt. Just like I just didn't. And I just almost never did. And I would see a cop and I would put my seatbelt on, right? Okay, but I just didn't wear seatbelts. And it wasn't like I didn't think it was better. It's just like, I don't know. I'm not sure why altogether I didn't. But I decided after that second seatbelt ticket in the last 12 months, I decided this is stupid because this is really a comparatively easy action that if I would just rewire myself to do a new habit, it would be better. Like objectively, it would be better. It probably is a lot safer. It would be better for me not to have tickets. It would be, and plus it would set. So I made a mental list of everything of why I wanted to do this. I know it's safer. I know it would be a better example for my kids. I know my wife would be happier. I know I wouldn't have to pay $20. I made this list like this pains and pleasures list, right? I made this list in my mind. I started with why. I made this list in my mind. I really thought it through. And then I said, all right, I didn't actually write this one down on paper because okay, let's be honest, wearing your seatbelt, that's a pretty small habit, right? Like it's not really super hard to change, theoretically. And so instead of writing it down, I developed a mantra. Instead of beating myself up, because what most people do when they start developing a habit, I'm going to talk more about this later in the series, but when most people start habits, what they do is they're like, oh, the first time they forget, they're like, oh, I'm so stupid. I always do this. What does the matter with me? Why don't I remember this? I don't understand. What is the deal with me? And they beat themselves up about it. Instead, I decided I'm going to do this right here. I'm going to say, when I realize I'm driving down the road and I realize I haven't put my seatbelt on yet. And because I backed up because I was in a hurry and I got in the car and I was on the phone or whatever and I got in the car and I took off, and when I realized that I haven't done it yet, here's what I'm going to do. Okay? I'm going to smile. Okay? I'm going to pump my fist. I'm going to put on my seatbelt and I'm going to say, I love putting on my seatbelt because it helps me show a good example to my kids and be safer, and it reflects my highest values. And ask my wife, okay, is this true, babe? All right, yes, I have done this. I have done this over and over and over again. Now, since I started rewiring myself, I've gone through these various stages. First of all, I would forget almost every single time. But that's fine. I would realize that I have put it on when I was pulling into the parking lot of the place I was going. Okay? And I'm going to take it off like when I get that parking spot right over there. But that's not important. That's not important. Like I'm not going to beat myself up about that. I'm in the process of changing a habit. And so I'd say, I love putting on my seatbelt because it helps me reflect my highest values and be more safe and be a good example for my kids. And then I'd pull in the parking spot, take it back off, and go in the store. Right. Now here's the thing. Eventually, I would remember it about the time I backed into the street. And I would still do the same thing. And then it suddenly hit me this week. Several times this week, I put it on and I never even thought about it at all. Now that's when you've gotten to a place where it's automatic, right? Oh, thank you, Carl. That's very kind of you. Like that's when you've gotten to this place where it's automatic and like it's flowing, and you're not having to affirm it because it's already affirmed in here. It's already decided in here. It's already rewired. Oh, that's where you want to get to, right? That's where you want to get to, where it's like it's automatic and you don't have to like make yourself do it. It's not harnessing my willpower. Oh, I've got to put my seatbelt. It's like it's getting to that place where it's automatic. Now, listen, I know that's really small. Okay, I know that seatbelt is like this big compared to what you're dealing with. Okay, all right, I know that's true. But here's the thing: it's just it's different in degree, but it's not different in kind. It's the same thing. It's just smaller. Like if you can decide, I'm going to write this down. I'm going to make myself, I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm going to be like, every time I realize, I want to do this, I'm going to affirm it and build it and be glad about it and tell myself why and smile and do it. And then at the end of the other end of this, eventually, I'm not going to have to do that anymore. By the way, I have forgotten my seatbelt exactly 3 times since I started doing this. 3 times. Now, there are times, like I said, where I put it on almost at the end of the trip. But only 3 times have I gotten out of the car and realized, oh, I forgot to wear my seatbelt. Only 3 times. Now, then that's been a while. I'm not sure when the last one was. It's been like 3 weeks ago when the last one was. So what am I saying? Is it possible to rewire? Yes. Write it down, make it clear, figure out exactly, and then tell yourself all the time. You are the herald who's going to run with the vision, right? You're that guy. You're that person. Write it down, make it clear, and say, and then don't beat yourself up. I'm going to talk more about those little things as we go. All right, so number six, tell someone. Oh, I should tell you that, like my new seatbelt habit, all right? That's what it says on the blank. Number 6, tell someone. Ecclesiastes 4, 9, and 10. Let's read this one out loud together, all right? 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Okay, so some of you would say, well, I feel like I don't have anybody in my life right now to help it. Okay, here's what you do. You recruit somebody. Because it is true. 2 is not as good, or 1 is not as good as 2. 2 is really better than 1. So recruit somebody. So you go tell somebody. Instead of goal bragging, by the way, do you know that goal bragging is actually negatively associated with accomplishing your goals? When you go tell people, like, I'm going to lose 27 pounds by the end of February. Okay, when you tell people that, and they're like, awesome, good for you, that's fantastic. Your brain actually gets this little hit of dopamine, which is the feel-good chemical. It gets a little hit of dopamine that makes you feel as good as if you accomplished it. And your habit-forming center in your brain tells you, oh, I can get that just by telling people. And so you don't actually have to do it to get the good feeling. And so instead of being like, I'm going to goal brag, instead share it as a habit and say, would you hold me accountable for this new habit? Okay? By the way, I told my wife and I told my daughter about my seatbelt thing, right? And I told them and I explained to them that this is what I'm doing, and I explained. The first time they got in the car with me specifically, I said, now, I'm going to say something here. And I put my seatbelt on and said, I love wearing my... And then I had to explain to Gracie why I was expressing my great love of putting on seatbelts. Because she was like... So what I'm saying is recruit somebody. Tell them this is a new habit and ask them to help hold you accountable. Now, here's the last question. The only last question left to ask is this. When are you going to take the time to get clear? Right? So today, you've been thinking, well, I need to change some habits. When are you going to take the time to get clear? Because it is going to take some time. You're going to have to go sit down. In fact, take this handout with you and go sit down and say, all right, let me think through this. Let me write some stuff down. Let me think through it. Let me identify my pains and pleasures. Let me say why I want to do this. And write down your clear vision statement for this. When are you going to go do that? Because I have been a pastor for 15 years, and let me tell you what happens. What happens is everybody sits here and smiles and says, that's a great point. And then everybody leaves, and life happens, right? And your whole plan gets nuked. So right now, figure out, when are you going to go do this? When are you going to go schedule that? When are you going to sit down? When are you going to get quiet? Is it tonight? Are you going to shut off the TV? Are you going to put away the laptop? Or are you going to what are you going to do to get clear on exactly what it is, the habit that you want to see changed in your life? So identify that. Write it down right there at the bottom of your handout. When is this? When's it going to happen? When are you going to do that? Right? Write it down and then tell somebody on the way out. All right? Let's bow our heads together for prayer.